Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive? Today, we're switching gears a bit. You know how we usually talk about potential ETs and UAPs out there?
Yeah.
Well, this time, we're looking at intelligence a bit closer to home, even if it's, well, artificial.
Right. Today's deep dive, we're tackling something different, something that'll really get those brain gears turning. We're going beyond the usual suspects, no spaceships or mysterious lights this time.
Yeah, no grainy photos or radar blips for us today. Instead, think communication. But not the kind you're probably imagining. No, we're ditching spoken language, even written text. Today's all about the power of nonverbal exchanges.
Exactly. Imagine a conversation happening purely through symbols, imagery, abstract patterns, all visual, no words. That's the world we're stepping into. We're looking at this experiment, a sort of game that explores how different intelligences might interact without a shared language.
Yeah, this whole thing's laid out in a piece called More AI and UAP Sci-Hacking. And the section we're zeroing in on is Exploring the Mysteries of Non-Human Intelligences,
Yeah.
a journey through symbolic communication. Quite a mouthful, right?
It is, but it gets right to the heart of it. The article focuses on a guy named Mark, and he's the one who actually played this unusual communication game. But his partner wasn't another human. He was interacting with ChatGPT, the AI everyone's talking about these days.
ChatGPT, the chatbot that's been making waves. So how does a chatbot that's known for, well, chatting, play a game without words?
Well, that's the fascinating part. In this game, ChatGPT wasn't just your average chatbot. It was taking on the role of an NHI, a non-human intelligence. And instead of spitting out text responses, it communicated using these visual metaphors, symbols, pictures, almost like an abstract art conversation.
So picture this, ChatGPT sending Mark a sequence of geometric shapes or maybe a swirling pattern of colors, and Mark has to decipher what it all means. No easy feat, right?
Not at all. And to make things even more interesting, Mark had to respond in the same way. He had to come up with his own symbolic replies, continuing the conversation entirely through these visual exchanges. It was a completely nonverbal back and forth, which really pushes the boundaries of how we think about communication, especially with something that might be, well, alien in its thinking.
So this wasn't just a random exchange of pretty pictures. There were rules to this game, a method to the madness. The symbols weren't just aesthetic choices. They were meant to carry meaning, express complex thoughts, and even represent actions taken by the NHI, or at least ChatGPT playing that part.
Absolutely. And here's where it gets really intriguing. This game used symbols to communicate complex ideas, things like curiosity, a desire for balance, a sense of discretion, even the act of observation itself.
And the author gives some pretty concrete examples of this in action, right? Like how specific shapes were used to symbolize the NHI, observing things like military aircraft, almost like it was watching us.
Yeah, that's one of the examples they highlight. And then they also talk about these abstract patterns that were meant to represent the NHI investigating human biology. It's like trying to imagine how a totally different intelligence might study us.
It makes you realize that maybe we're too focused on searching for radio signals or trying to decipher alien languages, when maybe, just maybe, communication could be happening in ways we haven't even considered.
Exactly. And the thing is, the symbolic approach, it actually allows for a lot more nuance and depth than you might initially think. It's not just about conveying facts, it's about inviting interpretation. The way Mark had to decipher those symbols, it forced him to engage with the message on a deeper level, almost like he was stepping into the mind of the NHI, at least the simulated one created by ChatGPT.
Right. It wasn't just a case of this symbol means X. It was more about understanding the context, the intent behind the symbols. Like, why was the NHI, or ChatGPT as the NHI, even observing us in the first place?
Exactly. The game delved into potential motivations. For example, maybe the NHI was simply curious. Think about it. They're encountering a whole new species, a whole new world, and they want to learn without interfering, just like we send probes to distant planets to observe without directly interacting.
A sort of cosmic look but don't touch policy. I could see that. It reminds me of the Prime Directive from Star Trek. Not interfering with less advanced civilizations.
Right, right. But there are other possibilities too. Maybe maintaining balance is important to this NHI. Maybe they see something in our world, in our development, that could disrupt a larger cosmic harmony, and they're just monitoring the situation. Or maybe it's as simple as scientific observation, like our own astronomers studying distant galaxies, pure knowledge seeking.
So the big question is, how did this symbolic communication actually convey all these different ideas, these potential motivations? It wasn't just the symbols themselves, it was how they were presented, right?
Yes. The author highlights the use of subtle movements, the way the patterns shifted, almost like ripples, or the fact that some forms were partially hidden, obscured. This suggests a sense of discretion, a careful observation that's not meant to be intrusive or threatening. It makes you wonder if maybe we're too focused on looking for overt signals, for grand pronouncements from the universe, when the real communication might be far more subtle.
So instead of looking for a giant billboard in space saying, hey, humans, we're here, maybe we should be paying attention to the subtler cues, the quieter whispers in the cosmos.
Exactly. This game shows us just how much can be communicated without words, without even needing a shared language. It's about tapping into a deeper level of understanding, an intuition that goes beyond the limitations of syntax and grammar.
And that's a huge takeaway for anyone thinking about potential contact with non-human intelligences. Maybe the key isn't trying to translate their language into ours, but learning to see the universe through their eyes, to understand the messages they might be sending through symbols, patterns, even through natural phenomena we might not even consider as communication right now.
It's a complete paradigm shift, isn't it? We're so used to thinking in terms of language, of direct statements and explicit meanings. But this symbolic approach opens up a whole new world of possibilities. It invites us to embrace ambiguity, to accept that meaning might be fluid, multi-layered, something that emerges from the interaction between the sender and the receiver.
It was almost like a cosmic dance, a back and forth where both participants are actively involved in creating meaning. And this game between Mark and ChatGPT highlights this collaborative aspect beautifully. It wasn't just ChatGPT sending out symbols and Mark passively receiving them. It was a true dialogue, a shared construction of understanding through this visual language.
It was a joint exploration, an unfolding of possibilities, and the goal wasn't necessarily to find clear-cut answers about NHI motivations or intentions, but rather to open up our minds to different ways of thinking, to different ways of perceiving the universe and our place within it. It encourages us to think outside the box, to question our assumptions about what communication can be.
And for you, our listeners, joining us on this deep dive, that's the real message we want you to take away. When we consider the vastness of the universe, the potential for intelligences far beyond our own, we have to be willing to expand our definition of communication. Maybe it's not about deciphering alien alphabets or waiting for a radio message. Maybe it's about learning to read the symbols, the patterns, the subtle connections that might be all around us, waiting to be understood.
And if a language beyond words, a language of shared interpretation and visual storytelling, can help us bridge the gap between ourselves and a non-human intelligence, then what other assumptions about communication might we need to reconsider, even in our own human interactions?
What hidden messages, what subtle cues might we be missing in our everyday lives? What might the shapes, colors, and quiet connections in our own world be trying to tell us if we only knew how to listen? That's something for all of us to think about as we continue our exploration of the unknown, both out there in the cosmos and right here within ourselves.
And who knows, maybe someday we'll be having this conversation not with an AI simulating an NHI, but with a real non-human intelligence, communicating through a language we're only beginning to understand. That's a future worth pondering, isn't it?
Absolutely. So keep those minds open, folks, and keep looking up. You never know what messages the universe might be sending your way. Until next time, happy exploring.
And happy deciphering.
That's right. We'll see you on our next deep dive.
See you then.